Welcome to the More Than Fitness podcast.
Okay, everyone, let's all take a deep breath real quick. It's very strange times that we're living in. However, that doesn't mean that we can't get through it. Okay? In today's Minisode, I've got a calm and collected mood today. Things are just weird. And so I want to be if I can be any type of voice of reason to allow you guys to relax a little bit. Even if, don't get me wrong, I know things are serious. However, I think that any type of unnecessary suffering is exactly that. It's unnecessary. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Minisode number 21 on the More Than Fitness podcast. And yeah, this coronavirus thing has got everyone on edge. But again, like I said, I think I've got a good minisode. It's an appropriate minisode to talk about during this time. And it's going to be about remaining calm amongst all this chaos that's going on, because panicking and freaking out and, again, unnecessary suffering is it's not helpful. And the way that we are going to get through this is by being smart, being optimistic, being practical, and not making it worse than it needs to be. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is by Seneca. Actually, he's a philosopher. You can definitely, if you haven't heard of him before, definitely look him up. But he said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." I mean, think about it. Things on a daily basis that you conjure up in your head. I know that I often do it too. We think of the worst case scenario. And especially with something like this, whenever it's something unknown, whenever it's a virus, whenever it's in our evolutionary biology to be afraid of something like this, it can be really scary. And I sympathize with that and I empathize with that. And it is scary. However, again, we don't need to make things harder on us than they already are. I know a lot of people are going through a lot of stuff with jobs, with family, with illness, with safety. There's a lot going on. However, I think that if we can recognize these emotions, understand these emotions, and figure out, okay, what is in our control in this uncontrollable situation, right? I think that's going to be what's key here. And I think that suppressing our anxiety, because look, there's got to be a balance, right? You can't be completely on one end of the spectrum where you're completely terrified, you're panicking, you're making things worse, worse than they already are, objectively, how they are. But it's also not good to be the people that say it's completely overblown, none of this matters, people are freaking out over nothing, then they bring up the flu and obesity. It's like, that's not, well, one, there's logical fallacies within there and it's not correct. And two, it's not helpful. So figure out how you can be helpful in a time like this, how you can be the voice of reason and that shoulder to rely on in a hard time like this. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And with anxiety and fear, it's like, speaking of evolutionary processes, it's just like, these are ingrained in us for a reason. Having anxiety on a regular basis, having fear on a regular basis, like this is what has kept us alive for such long periods of time. This threat response is a necessary part of being where we are today. And to say that we should just try and suppress all of our anxiety or all of our fear is it's naive. It's if we were just peaceful and happy and just free flowing all the time, we would eventually get eaten by a tiger or something like that. It's just, that's not how our bodies have anxiety and fear for a reason. And it's to protect us, especially over time and against wild animals or something like that. So understanding that anxiety is going to be a part of your life and trying to accept that and work with that experience of anxiety, work with this experience that we're all dealing with, right? It's a difficult time. However, to try and say that it's not there. Or there's a great quote. It's like, what we resist persists. And it's like things that this isn't just with anxiety, but anything that we try to say, even with diet foods or something like that, or with junk food, right? We say we can't have this junk food, and immediately you want junk food, right? We want things that we tell ourselves we can't have, or we experience things we say that we shouldn't experience or that we can't experience. So it's like anxiety and fear. These are all part of us. And I think that should be taken seriously. These emotions are valid. These fears that you're having are valid. However, coping with them in a positive way and in a productive way is our best move here. Not letting our thoughts and fears and everything run amok and spiral into chaos is not helpful. So anxiety is not a choice, but how we relate to that anxiety is our choice, right? Again, because anxiety is part of us. It is in us. It is us, right? So to demonize it, or to think that it's bad, or that you should feel bad about feeling anxious, it's just not, it's not true. However, exploring that emotion is often helpful, because you can kind of get to the root of this anxiety. And if you can explore that and work with it from a detached perspective, it can be very helpful. However, things that you can do during this time to remain calm amongst all this chaos, one of the things is going to be to limit your inputs, right? So this is going to be news, social media, and most people are going to be stuck in their houses, and you're not going to have any choice but to, or you're going to have this perception that you can't do anything but watch the news or get on social media. It's like, but all that's doing is creating more issues and creating more anxiety and more fear. And again, I don't want to belittle this situation, because obviously it's a very serious situation. However, unnecessary suffering is unnecessary. And so I think that limiting our inputs, I'm not saying to never check the news or anything like that, but limiting that to once or twice a day, I think is fine. Making sure that we limit ourselves on social media is also going to be very important. And during this information age, we're just constantly bombarded with stimulus. But whenever you're constantly bombarded with stimulus and you're being distracted, often mindlessly, this comes at a sacrifice of reflection, of critical thinking, of problem solving, and deep thinking in general. And whenever you don't have those things, these surface level fears and anxieties and things to just distract us in the moment, they can rise to the top, and then they can fill our entire lives, instead of reflecting on our emotions and our fears, and trying to take actions towards bettering the situation that we are stuck in, right? That's all. Like, what we can do is what we can do. We can control what we can control, and let's not dwell on anything else, right? Because it's just not, again, it's not helpful. So yeah, the first thing I would say is to limit your inputs. That will be very helpful in this situation. Next is going to tie along those lines, is some of you may be alone more often in this process. Let's say if you live by yourself or something, I'm not naive to think that that's very common amongst some of you that may be listening to this. And I think that we need to understand what that actually feels like sometimes, because we can avoid a lot of life's problems and our own internal issues by distraction of being around other people. Or again, social media allows us at our fingertips. But spending some time alone in that solitude can be so important. And one of a great book on this is Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. And he talked about how it's difficult to understand yourself if you are never by yourself. And I think that nothing could be truer. And then the famous quote by Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician and physicist, he said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Again, I think that this period of time is forcing a lot of us to do that, and we have to sit alone with our thoughts and what is going on in our lives right now. And again, this time can create a lot of negative emotions because there's legit negative things going on around us. You could have lost your job. You could be having trouble paying for food or stuff for your kids or something. It's a difficult time. However, using this time to bask in that loneliness and to understand what's going on and reflect on what these past 6, 12, 24 months of your life has been and what the next 6, 12, 24 months of your life in the future could be is very important. It can be very uncomfortable. However, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And that's something worth thinking about. So being alone, spending some time alone, understanding yourself, whatever this could be. This could be writing, journaling, contemplating, thinking, meditating, whatever you want to do. But get comfortable being alone and by yourself, and really think through a lot of your own shit, to be completely blunt. The next thing that I want to talk about that I think, especially where we're just sitting around and we're looking for things to do, getting rid of your stuff. Getting rid of things that aren't useful around your house, like things, spring cleaning or whatever, things that you say that you always want to do, and now you actually have the excuse to do because you're at home all day. So getting rid of some of the crap around your house that's not essential could be very helpful, and especially in a time like this, whenever money is tight for a lot of you, learning how to sell things on eBay, I have the book. It's over there. eBay for Dummies, the little yellow books. If you've never sold anything before, there are books out there to learn about this. There's YouTube videos, whatever, selling some of your shit and making some money in your spare time. That could be huge. Learning how eBay works, learning how Amazon works, learning how, what's some of the other ones? Not Shopify. Etsy would be another one. Figuring out things that you could sell to make a little bit of extra money to make your spare time more useful and productive. That can be huge. Whenever I was in undergrad, I would, if any of you have heard of Plato's Closet before, it's where you can basically take some of your clothes and they will buy your clothes from you if it's in a certain condition and it's in their inventory needs. And what I would do whenever I was younger, in college, I would go to Plato's Closet. I would ask the person at the counter, I was like, hey, can I see your all's inventory sheet? They had this inventory sheet that was all color coded and everything about what they needed in that moment. So whether it was hats or belts or polos or shoes or shorts, whatever, they had specifications on what they needed. And what I would do is I would go home. I would go back to my parents' house, who has there's tons of clothes. I've got tons of clothes from whenever I was younger, and I would write down what they needed on the inventory sheet. I would go home. I would get those clothes for myself or my mom or my dad or my brother or my sister, and I would bring those clothes back to Lexington, back to my college, and I would go to Plato's Closet and I would sell those clothes to him. So it was a win for everybody, basically. Plato's Closet got the clothes, I got the money, and then there was less shit at my parents' house, basically. So being innovative and thinking of ways to make some extra money during this time, and also getting rid of a lot of the clutter in your household. It's like, if you don't know where to start, just start with your room. Just start by cleaning your room and figuring out what is absolutely necessary. And if you haven't touched something or used something within the past 6 months, well, it's probably a good sign that you can probably toss it. I know the minimalists are, if you follow those guys, they're on Instagram. They've got a podcast. They even have a documentary on Netflix. I think it's just called Minimalism. Definitely check them out. But they have something called a packing party. This is very extreme. However, these are extreme times. You've got plenty of you have plenty of time to waste. So they did a packing party, I think is what it was called. And they packed everything up basically in their house, like they were going to move. And then over the next 6 months, they would take things out of the boxes that they just needed for everyday use. And then at the end of the 6 months, the stuff that they didn't use, they either donated it or they tried to sell it. And that's one simple way of knowing what you need and what you don't need. So yeah, getting rid of your stuff, that is also going to be helpful. And the last thing is finding a hobby, right? Of course, a lot of your all's hobby is going to be fitness, and it's going to be doing home workouts or going for walks or figuring out what you can do to stay healthy in a time like this. But whenever I say find a hobby, and I don't mean like Netflix or video games or something like that. And I'm not saying that those things are wrong. I still do those things too. However, it shouldn't take up hours upon hours of your time. And so it's not something to distract us, but something that simultaneously challenges but relaxes us at the same time. And activities like this could be, I have a bunch written down here. So it could be walking, reading, cooking, learning a language, solving a puzzle, writing, hiking, painting, artwork, learning video or Photoshop, so like video editing, photography. You could learn about Stoic philosophy, which would be very helpful in a time like this, because the philosophy is all about controlling what you can control. That's a tough one. Controlling what you can control and not worrying about the rest that you can't, that's out of your control. So Stoic philosophy, I would definitely look that up. Gardening, hunting. There's definitely plenty of hobbies out there, but figuring out something that could enhance your life without it just being mindless scrolling on Instagram, or watching Netflix, or just activities that, because with Netflix and with scrolling on Instagram, and sometimes it's both of those at the same time, these can actually be anxiety inducing activities. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want. So think about gardening or something like that, that can be fulfilling, and learning about these things. Even if you just read about how to cook or something, that can be helpful. And then cooking in a time like this, learning how to cook is, that's one of the main things. I think I'm actually going to be trying to do more of that while we're in this whole quarantine situation as well. So to recap real quick, limiting your inputs, that's number one. Being alone and accepting this loneliness and accepting yourself and being okay with solitude is going to be number two. Getting rid of your stuff, so selling it, donating it, learning eBay, Amazon. And then the fourth one is going to be find a hobby. So figure out something that you can do, not necessarily to distract you, but something that could challenge you and relax you at the same time. And so to all of you out there, this is a weird time. I feel for everyone out there. I've been reading a lot of stuff, a lot of stories. People have some very sad stories, and I'm doing my best to help out my clients and to help out the people close to me, reaching out to friends. But just do whatever you can, because we need each other in a time like this. And there's not much else I can say to that. I want to stay in the training nutrition lane, but however, keep trying to get your information from credible sources, stay indoors, try to think about everyone as a collective as opposed to your own selfish needs, even though as hard as that could be in a time like this. However, hoarding tons of toilet paper is not a good idea. I think that's going to be it for Minisode number 21 on the More Than Fitness podcast. Thank you as always for watching and for listening. Stay safe out there, my friends.